It's difficult to measure the engagement of the side of a bus, but who knows? If we're all walking around in like smart glasses in a number of years, potentially that is a solvable problem.
Knowing the pitfalls of both sides of how content creators react with brands, this whole concept is basically built for scaling that, breaking down barriers. Essentially, what we want to do is remove all the admin that content creators are having to do with brands, to come up with the contracts, to come up with the negotiation. We're getting rid of all that. It's a huge shift from classic PPC and Google, Meta. There's a massive shift in revenue from those traditional ads over to more like user generated content and creators actually telling a story about brands and their experiences with it.
I think people coming into Bittensor, the biggest barrier is understanding, especially post detail, 100 plus subnets, infinite complexity, and it's just a bit daunting for a lot of people, and it's a barrier to people coming in. We think if we can close that understanding mismatch, considering that Bittensor is essentially an incentive network, the fact that we aren't incentivizing the people that have the very skills to solve this problem is crazy.
Welcome to the Ventura Labs podcast. Today, we're joined by brothers Wil and Tom Blears, co-founders of Bitcast, Subnet 93, set out to reimagine the creator economy for the Web3 world. They break down Bitcast's API-secured Rails, its cross-platform roadmap, and the playbook poised to pull budgets away from legacy ads, showing how provable, decentralized, on-chain creators can be rewarded for custom curated content. Now, back to Tom and Wil with the 41st Ventura Labs podcast. Wil, Tom, good to get you guys on the podcast. How are you guys doing today?
Doing very well. Thanks for having us on. Big fans of the pod.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks, Grant.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And let's start with, what is your backgrounds? Because you guys have Subnet 93 now, Bitcast. I guess you can introduce that, give a brief tagline. What is Bitcast? What you do there? And then what led you to being Subnet owners in Bitcast? What's the background?
Yeah, sure. So Bitcast in a nutshell is an incentive layer for content creators, storytellers, creatives. And so our miners are video creators and are incentivized based on engagement, put very simply. But my background is a computer science graduate. I was in TradFi software for 5 or 6 years, and maybe 8 or 9 months ago, I joined Tensora as their first employee. Joined Jack and Giles there, was mining there for a good while, and just became obsessed with Bittensor, to be honest. And then decided it was just too exciting to not go and try something of my own. So I was doing a bit of solo mining for a while. And then more recently, we've moved into the subnet ownership game with Bitcast.
Yeah, my background, so I've been in sort of TradFi for about 15 years. I used to be a data analyst, and more recently, or sort of about 5, 6 years ago, I turned into sort of project leads, developing software within the UK pension space. But more specifically to Bitcast, over sort of the last sort of 3 years, I've rather interesting started an e-commerce company, which gave me a really good flavor of how running ads is. So running PPC, PR releases, working with content creators, influencers, etc. And as well, whilst I was doing that, I also started an Instagram channel, which ended up doing really well, which is sort of hyper local, local to Manchester where I live. Ended up with 60,000 followers, and I was getting sponsorship deals to talk about certain topics, to demonstrate, local places and events that were going on. And so these two experiences, running in tandem, really gave me a good flavor of both sides of the coin of marketing. So running ads on one side myself, but also being the ad on the other side. And it sort of gave me a good visibility on like the pitfalls and the challenges within the space. So yeah, that's one of the things sort of that helped us get onto the idea of Bitcast.
And then when did you guys start development on the subnet? When did the idea happen and you're like, this is what we should work on, this is what we should do?
So it's about 6 weeks ago now. So we were looking at Bittensor, and we were looking for problems that we could solve. And we, like many people within Bittensor, possibly all people within Bittensor, know that we're undervalued. And we know just from everything that's going on in the ecosystem and all the value being produced all the time, that we should be like Tau should be a lot higher than it is. So we're looking at that thinking, why is that not the case? And we come to the conclusion that the number one problem Bittensor has today is complexity. Once people are in Bittensor, they don't leave. They're committed, Tau pilled. But I think people coming into Bittensor, the biggest barrier is understanding, especially post DTAU, 100 plus subnets, infinite complexity, and it's just a bit daunting for a lot of people, and it's a barrier to people coming in. We think if we can close that understanding mismatch, we can really help the Bittensor ecosystem kick on. The people that are best equipped to do that are people like yourselves, Grant, people who can tell a story. But considering that Bittensor is essentially an incentive network, the fact that we aren't incentivizing the people that have the very skills to solve this problem is crazy. So that's what we're doing. We're closing that incentive gap with Bitcast.
Yeah, we're basically using the Bittensor incentive layer to actually be Bittensor's marketing budget. We like to think of it in that way. So yeah.
I guess let's get a little more technical then. How does Bitcast work? What do these content creators do? How do they plug into your subnet? How can content creators compete for crypto rewards? And in this case, your alpha token.
Yeah, got you. It might be just a good place to give a bit of a rundown of what's going on. So a content creator would create their miner and attach their YouTube account to the miner. And that we publish briefs every week, content briefs on our website and on X. And essentially a content brief will be, a topic for discussion or to be explained. Content creators pick up the brief, bring that brief to life in their own creative style, release the content onto YouTube, and we then evaluate the metrics off the back end of the YouTube API, and then we score it using the competition metrics within Bittensor. So content creators are essentially competing against each other and are scored on the attention and the engagement that they can generate.
And then let's give an example of a specific brief. What was the first brief that you guys had?
First brief was essentially to educate on detail. So each brief it basically has an overall description, but then it will also contain a few bullet points that need to be hit. So it will be explain this, highlight this point, and yeah, as long as you hit the brief, you are then eligible for scoring on engagement.
And then for that scoring on engagement, you guys are using YouTube videos. How do you score the briefs? How do you judge if the brief was, or if the video was about the brief? How do you know which video is better than the other? How does that look?
Yeah, so there's two parts to it. There's verifying the relevance of the video and that they've successfully hit the brief. So very simply, that is taking the YouTube transcript, taking the YouTube description for the video, and feeding that into an LLM along with the brief, and that will give us a green light that they've hit the brief. And then beyond that, the key metric that we're looking at is minutes watched on the video. And the way that we're getting this data is through the backend YouTube Analytics API and YouTube Data API. So at the moment, we're collecting tons and tons of data from these YouTube accounts that goes far beyond just minutes watched, and we plan to add complexity as we try and guide this to its final destination. But at the moment, quite simply, minutes watched, 7-day moving average, and that's your score.
And how do you think that this system will redefine content creation? Or is that the goal here? What is the goal of this system?
So, I mean, going back to what I said before about knowing the pitfalls of both sides of how content creators react with brands, like this whole concept is basically built for scaling that, breaking down barriers. Essentially, what we want to do is remove all the admin that content creators are having to do with brands to come up with the contracts, to come up with the negotiations. We're getting rid of all that. It just means creators can spend more time on creating content. They're also now being rewarded directly based on their engagement. So it just means that they're going to be fine tuning their skills. They're going to get more time to actually do that, make more effective content. So yeah, and as well, like the actual like market, the actual model is quite novel. So usually a brand, if they wanted to sign a contract, a content creator, it's either going through an agency where you've got middlemen involved and it's still quite time onerous, or it's reaching out to content creators themselves. And you might contact like, 1, 2, 3 content creators, come up with your contract, agree your price. Bitcast is totally different. The way it works, you publish your brief as the brand, and then you're going to get hundreds of creators spreading your message, all within a certain time frame. You're going to get mass noise and mass education about your topic and your brand and whatever it is that you want to shout about, I suppose. So it's a totally different flip on how this industry works, and yeah, we just as we get more and more creators on board, that creates more and more value, and that just means that the briefs become more and more valuable, and the demand on those briefs is going to increase, and it's just going to turn into this flywheel of value within our subnet. Yeah, we think we've come up with a very, very novel approach that is vastly improved on the current situation.
And you said you ran a social media account with 60,000 followers and you had partnerships or sponsors. How did that look? And then how would that look on Bitcast in your specific case with that social media account?
So, well, firstly, that account is on Instagram, so it's not a YouTube account, but I suppose the essence is the same, isn't it? So, previously, I would be having brands contact me all the time. I would have to personally separate the wheat from the chaff, I suppose, where you've got brands that just I'm not interested in publishing content about that. Or you might go into conversations with them, over just DMs and spend a lot of time speaking to them, and then the deal doesn't actually materialize. And there's a lot of that. Even when you do get the deal, it is still quite an onerous process, and then you've got to go through exactly what they want, like when they want it to be dropped, and then there's a lot of toing and throwing. And even on their side, there's a lot of effort involved in that as well. So yeah, to be honest, it was quite a frustrating experience. Obviously, there's still value there, so I was doing it, but in the end, I actually stopped doing it because it was getting that onerous and that frustrating to carry on with.
A big point I think people might say is since minors are essentially anyone or anything, how do you quality control for like a company comes in, they say, hey, do this, I want a ad for this. How do you quality control and deliver, I guess, a product or result back to somebody?
Yeah, so I suppose first thing is the brief has to be well written. A poor brief could lead to poor quality. But we find that the system can handle quite a detailed brief, and the briefs are very flexible, so you can put different constraints even on potentially the sentiment of the message or the exactly what information should be contained in the content. So I think a well-written brief is the first thing. Secondly, because we're going in through the back-end YouTube APIs, we can collect a huge amount of data. We can see this isn't all necessarily stuff that we're using at the moment, but it's all there for us when we do want it. But you can see the demographics, the countries of the audiences. So there's a lot more nuance to than just looking at purely engagement. We can actually go a lot deeper, and we hope to be able to offer more bespoke services to brands in the future, where they can choose exactly what type of engagement they want. Yeah, anything to add on that, Tom?
I suppose just touching on the point about which brands to work with as well. Obviously, we're targeting Bittensor at the moment, and we're gonna stick with Bittensor content for like our first phase, I suppose. But when our network of creators builds up to a point where we think we can expand into, Web3 in general, then we'll make that leap and we'll start working with brands outside of just Bittensor. And I suppose from that point, we are planning on moving into Web2 as well. But again, that will come at a point when we believe our network of creators can provide value within that space. So it's going to be a natural progression, and really the Bittensor ecosystem is like a launch pad where we can fine tune our skills for this subnet, and also for us to build our initial miners and content creators out. And it's basically we're going to be building up on which brands to work with and selecting them carefully, I suppose, in the outset.
And you said this first phase is going to be focused on Bittensor and Bittensor content creators. How do you increase the scope of that over time?
Well, it's a flywheel, and we think we have a really clean, tight flywheel, which is centered around a path to revenue that's quite short. So the brief that goes live tomorrow is the first Bittensor subnet that we'll be promoting, and it is subnet 93. So we hope that we're looking forward to the content that comes out for that. I think including this very podcast. So I think when people see that, I think we'll be able to demonstrate the quality of the content that's being generated and the value that we can give to a subnet. And I think there'll be once we've done that and we've sort of proven that concept, I wouldn't be surprised if we have a long line of subnets lining up to be next on. So that's basically our path to revenue. Is we want to be able to sell brief spots to subnets, and the flywheel is essentially putting that revenue into alpha buybacks to send the alpha token price up, which will in turn send the emissions up and the quality of the content creators up, and so it'll continue.
And you mentioned selling to other subnets. Would this look like a pure transaction in the Web2 world, or would this be based off the percent of alpha token they hold? They get determined what the briefs are.
Yeah, we'd like to experiment with different models, and we'll switch it up. I think moving to a model where we reward staking, high stakes of alpha with being able to promote a certain topic is a really interesting path, and possibly takes a bit more thought. Way simpler than that to start with is probably just we'll ask a subnet to either buy and burn some more of our alpha, or we ask them for some tau and then we use that as a buyback ourselves. So those are the sort of models that we'll experiment with.
You guys are very new as a subnet. You're very young. You launched actively less than 7 days ago. How does your roadmap look like for the future that dictates how you make these decisions going forward of design and what you want to incentivize?
I suppose the initial priority is the no code miner, because that really breaks down the barriers for entry for content creators. We will then, and we already are, looking into how we can expand into other social medias. We've been talking to a lot of creators this week, and it's very interesting to hear their different takes on which platform to move to. Obviously, X is obviously it's where a lot of the talk and the echo chamber is around Bittensor. So it's a lot of people asking for X to be the next one. But on the flip side of that, some of the creators are really pushing for TikTok as well. So we are going to part solution how we would do different systems, find out which one is going to be the most beneficial, but we're also going to be speaking to the community about which platform to go for next. But yeah, so no code miner, get as many creators on board as possible. Then we are going to be moving into other social media channels and growing out the network. But also, whilst we're doing that, we are going to be working on our analytics as well, because a massive like value to the advertiser is actually going to be able to look at how the engagement across all these creators looks, and bringing that all into one place is really going to be powerful. It's also going to enable them to learn from what they're doing and to scale it. So yeah, we've basically going to be moving onto a different platform and building out our analytics so that advertisers can extract as much value from using our service as possible.
Yeah, and just to add a little more to that, to the no code miner. In case people don't know, it basically it's something we're quite excited about. I think because of who our miners are, because they're not the best content creators are not necessarily technical, and are not necessarily going to super easily install a miner and run a miner. We've made it sort of one of our top priorities to build a miner that you can launch through Chrome, no code, take all the hassle out of it, and we think that can really help us to democratize the subnet. And as far as we know, that'll be the first no code miner on Bittensor, and it's something we're really excited about.
And in your current form, you require miners to use or to hand over their API keys to their YouTube accounts. Is there any concerns with that for security purposes? Like, what can you actually do by having that API?
Yeah, I mean that sounds quite sketchy when you put it like that, but this model. So what's actually shared is a temporary read-only access token to use for the API, and we're using it as it's designed to be used. So there are a bunch of other platforms that are like analytics layers that sit over the top of YouTube that creators use. So it's a very similar model to what's used in those cases. So yeah, it's not. Yeah, before you go telling everyone they've got to hand over their API keys, it's not as scary as that.
Is there any plans to use that data, just monetize the data itself you guys are able to collect?
I think you mentioned this the other day, Tom, but like we don't have any solid plans to do that. That's not really within our business model for the coming months. But I suppose from the data that we have, we have details on videos, we have success metrics on videos. That would be the building blocks for some sort of data correlation between to build some sort of model to possibly predict the engagement based on the stats of a video. So there's potential there, but it's certainly not on our roadmap for the foreseeable.
Yeah, and just to circle back to like the API and access to it. Like, the whole point of us having access to this API and this data is to make sure that the incentives and the rewards are going to genuine creators. Like, we're very aware that people can launch videos and farm engagement, but there's no value in that to like the sponsor or the content brief. So we're using that data to turn the knobs and twist the dials so that that doesn't generate revenue, but genuine creators like yourself and all the other channels that are creating real value are getting what they deserve. So yeah, we are basically, let us have your data so we can make sure you get paid.
And what is the most comparable business model in the Web 2 or traditional world that maps to what you guys are doing?
I mean, there is content creator agencies and big ones, both America, UK, across the world really. So I suppose their models are quite different to ours. Like I've mentioned before, that there's quite a lot of admin involved in getting into those. They're also middlemen, so they take a cut of the creator's profits. So we think we've got ways to outperform those. But I suppose on a grander scale, there's a huge shift from over the last several years. There's been a huge shift from classic PPC and Google, Meta. There's a massive shift in revenue from those traditional ads over to more like user generated content and creators actually telling a story about brands and their experiences with it. So I suppose we're going to be competing with that, and we're going to be grabbing market share from both the content creator agencies, but also the big players like Google and Meta.
And you're saying you'll take their market share of paid ads of, for example, an e-commerce site running YouTube ads or Google ads or Facebook ads.
Right, yeah, because I mean, there's a massive shift in general away from that. It's going to always be a massive industry, obviously, but we're going to be competing within the space, and we're going to bring in a new product and a new novel approach to delivering value. And the way that we're looking at the moment as well, the path to setting this up is a lot faster for brands, and then it's got a lot more immediate impact as well.
It's it's not a new business model, this marketing model, but it's like we've seen in a bunch of other subnets. You take a business model that we all know works out in Web 2, and you apply the Bittensor incentive mechanisms on top of it, and it's like rocket fuel that unlocks scale, speed, competitive energy, and quality that wouldn't otherwise be possible.
And then how has advertising changed over time? You're mentioning you're starting to see a shift towards more user-generated content. Do you think you'll attack like or replace TV advertisements entirely?
I mean, there's always going to be all these different platforms for advertising. They're not going to disappear, but there's definitely more and more revenue driving towards what's effective, right? So brands are all online. They're piling all their money into UGC, into ads and different content online. So there's always going to be space for TV ads. But I mean, podcasts are huge, right? And we're going to be playing around with different models on how to get like ads within podcasts as well. And we're going to be expanding into many different avenues with this Bitcast platform. But I can't say that TV is going to disappear.
I think it'll be diminished. I think you probably know the stats better than me, Tom, but it's something like influencer marketing is like $170 billion industry, due to triple in the next 5 years. Fact check me. It's in our white paper. I don't know if I've nailed the numbers there, but yeah, that's essentially influencer marketing is eating traditional marketing. We aim to eat influencer marketing.
That sounds very similar to what Bittensor's trying to do. Do you guys have any plans of ever expanding to other mediums besides just video? In, like, I guess, for example, a newspaper ad or text, those type of things.
Expanding into newspaper ads. We haven't considered it. That's an interesting one. It's probably low down the list. I think we'd rather, I think X and TikTok are two that we've discussed. Possibly X could be next up. X is that's where the conversation currently lives for crypto. So in one sense, it makes sense for us to go there. But then in another sense, X is where our echo chamber is, and potentially incentivizing Bittensor content outside of X is possibly more valuable. We don't know for sure, but yeah, we plan to expand to other platforms, other mediums. Yeah, certainly video and text. It's a different model. It's something we'll have to experiment with. For a bunch of reasons, YouTube is the best starting point, and once we've got that solid, I think we'll have learned a lot, and we'll be ready to move on to into another type of media.
What are the unique challenges for doing X content creation versus a YouTube video?
I think we'll have a much better answer to that after we've given it a go. But from our position, like one of the main concerns is bots, and I don't know for sure that X is worse for bots than YouTube, but I suspect it is. So we might need to, we need to make sure if we're incentivizing something, we need to make sure we have the tools and the ability to confirm that content is genuine and valuable. And we have that with YouTube. If we become sure that we can have that with X, we'll go into X.
And then I had mentioned newspapers. You said slow down the list. Newspaper more so represented physical ads in the real world, not just digital. Is there ever a timeline where you guys expand to physical ads in real life, like the side of a bus or a billboard? Do you ever see, is there a path there that may be utilized?
Never say never, but it's difficult to measure the engagement of the side of a bus. That's my initial thoughts on it. But who knows? If we're all walking around in like smart glasses in a number of years, potentially that is a solvable problem. So maybe.
So it's a validation problem, is why you couldn't do real world.
At the moment, probably, yeah.
And then 5-10 years from now, what would you say if we achieve X, Y, and Z, Bitcast has been successful, we've fulfilled our mission, our goals?
Good question. 5-10 years is tough when the speed of change is what it is in Bittensor. We haven't even considered 10 years down the line. There's just too many factors, too much to change. Like we're building ourselves to be agile and to be able to pivot. So our goals are more shorter term than 5 or 10 years. But in the shorter term, we want to be delivering real value to subnets and to Bittensor. We were saying the other day that like a goal of mine is, whenever a subnet announces that they're going on to novelty search and the price peaks instantly.
Yeah.
I want to get to the point in the near future where a subnet has a brief announced on Bitcast and the price pumps. I think at that point we'll say, right, we've got something that's working here. We're producing measurable value to companies, to brands. I want us to be towards the top of the list of subnets. I think we're a top 20, top 10 subnet in the not too distant future. and then another big goal of ours is to then move and start bringing revenue in from outside of Bittensor. There's all these incremental goals that we have, more so than looking 10 years down the line.
Yeah. Again, 10 years down the line, more so the most ambitious visions you guys have of what Bitcast will look like.
Well,
Time
look,
is relative for
yeah,
Bittensor work.
look, there's no reason why a decentralized model couldn't, in theory, replace centralized media, right? So, yeah, I think if you want a lofty goal, it would be great if we could spark something that turns into a big wave that transforms media as we know it.
And being a subnet that has only been live throughout detail, what do you think are the unique challenges you guys had to face versus pre-detail or just acquiring a older subnet?
Yeah, I mean, there's more to the game now. It's tough to say. Like, yeah, a big part of our thinking now, and every subnet's thinking now, is um, basically the price of your alpha, because that's the fuel for your business. But I suppose before detail, they were still trying to impress validators, although it was less of a public show and maybe more one-on-one calls. It's certainly interesting with thinking about how do we fund development. I think we're in a fortunate position where we have a short path to revenue, as I was saying earlier. But it's like, there's all these questions, and I don't think there's necessarily answers. Is it better to spend your revenue on your alpha token as buybacks? Is it better to pump it into accelerating the development of the company? Is it better to do one thing with that and then sell some of your owner stake to do one of the others, or is it the most important thing to never sell your owner stake? All these questions to think about. I quite enjoy that side of it. I enjoy that thinking about these things and all these extra levers that we have to play with. And sort of buying a subnet that was already existing and already has a portion of liquidity, like Tau Hash have done. That's also really interesting. It's not something we considered, but yeah, it's a really interesting approach as well.
There's been a lot of talk recently of subnet teams raising venture capital and outside funding. You guys are a small team, I would consider, just you two. Have you ever thought of raising venture capital? And if so, why would you? What are the pros and cons there?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So, like, we've interestingly had like quite a lot of conversations with different investors over the last couple of weeks. We've been learning about how different financing works as well, because there's a few different ways of actually doing it. Obviously, you can get investment into the holding company, or you can get tokens built on top of your subnet tokens, or you can just get people buying your actual subnet tokens. So yeah, we've been talking to people to learn what is available, but right now, like as of right now, I think we'd probably be raising for raising's sake. So it probably wouldn't be right for us right now. But I think in the near future, we're going to need, end of the day, if we've got more developers, our product is going to get better and more dominant quicker, which means it's going to be more valuable quicker for investors anyway. So I think we probably may be looking at investment in the near future to sort of as more of an accelerator to make us reach our goals as quickly as possible. But yeah, it's nothing's certain at the moment, and we're just sort of trying to navigate our first month and get our product out there and as many eyeballs on it as possible before we make any decisions like that.
I think there's no right way of doing it, and there's a lot of different types of businesses that are now subnets, and they all have different models and different views on revenue. Some may have short-term revenue, and their revenue may be way down the line, but like one isn't more valuable than the other. and this is something that we'll figure out as we go as an ecosystem. I think one of the advantages of building within Bittensor versus building a more traditional company outside of Bittensor is you have that funding stream from day one. And I'm not only talking about the funding into the owner wallet, I'm talking about all of that funding going to your creators and your miners. So in a way, being on Bittensor potentially allows you to start a business without needing to seek that funding. So yeah, I think there's different models will work for different subnets. Yeah, and we'll see.
There's a lot of parallels between what you guys are doing and a TikTok creator fund. How they throw money at people to just make content on their platform. Is there a way to leverage this decentralized creator fund of sorts to create a social media platform or partner with a social media platform like that?
Yeah, because that whole TikTok model, yeah, they were absolutely launching funds to creators to obviously just create anything. It didn't matter what they were creating, right? It was just basically just if you're getting views, you're getting paid, and you're getting paid a lot. So I mean that's got a lot of power, but that was to build up that social media, wasn't it? And it worked. TikTok's an absolute beast. So I mean, for us to, so what are we talking about? Like potentially Bitcast becoming a social media, or Bitcast teaming up with social media?
Either.
I think it is like YouTube or TikTok or any of those platforms. It has, it could in theory be turned into its own social media platform. But I think the difference is, like you were saying there, Tom, TikTok, they're optimizing for pure views, regardless of what the content is. But we're after quality, we're after meaningful impact. We want to be able to add value to a brand, rather than just glue people to their screens, regardless of what it is. I think that's probably the difference.
It's an interesting concept of you want to create content that is valuable, not just engaging, because there's been a real turn towards essentially attention farming. And you guys want to optimize for valuable content being created, not just attention grabbing content. How do you differentiate the two when incentivizing the content creation and judging the content that was made?
Like we've obviously got hold of the transcripts of the video, haven't we? So we can validate if they're talking about the concept that we want. And there's going to be ways that you could grab attention at the beginning and then move into covering the content, and there's definitely going to be strategies like that are going to unfold. But there's a percentage watch time, so like per video you've got an average percentage of the video that's been watched by your viewers. So if it's actually creating value, and it's not just a big attention grab at the beginning, or it's just not, if it's actually interesting and it's valuable to people, they will watch it for longer. They will stay more engaged. And so we're going to be using that in combination with the minutes to sort of measure if people are actually interested, and it's not just like an attention grab, because your attention is short, right? Like, if it's just an attention grab at the beginning, you're only going to be interested for like 4 seconds, 5 seconds. So you're going to drop off if it's not interesting after that. So yeah, we're going to use those two metrics really to sort of leverage that, I suppose. Yeah.
And then on the roadmap, how near term is it for people to approach you and say, we want to run this brief?
Already happening. Yeah, we already got a couple of people interested and asking us about how that would work. But as we were saying, we're running the brief on Bitcast this week, starting tomorrow, and that's us basically putting our name out there to say, look, like, this is what will happen if you sponsor a brief. This is how the content will look. So we're going to use that as a launch pad, and we'll be speaking to people. We've got advisors and people that we're speaking to within Bittensor, and we'll be carefully considering who we work with initially. But yeah, it's like Will said before. I think as soon as people realise what this platform is doing for subnets and apps within the space, I think there's going to be people climbing over each other to get a slot.
And how quickly do you guys anticipate this scaling? Is the scale of this determined by the amount of content creators you have or the amount of platforms you offer to where you can create content on, or is it something completely else that you think limits your scalability here?
So it's a balancing act, isn't it? So we don't have a business if we don't have a good network of creators. So I suppose that's why the no code miner is so pivotal to us right now, because as soon as we've got a lot of creators, there's massive value, and then after that, it's the brands will come, because they will see just the nature of content. Like, as soon as it's out there, everyone's going to see it and understand what's going on. So the brands will be coming and knocking. But yeah, I think it's the extra platforms just allows us to not only expand the reach of the network, but it also lets us, it opens doors to different products that we can develop and deliver as well. Like links are probably more, links to websites and actually trying to get people to buy things directly through links is probably more effective on like a TikTok, not TikTok, on X, because it's just easy to click. Whereas on a video, if it's explaining a product or demonstrating like values of a product, then YouTube might be better. So it just opens us up to work with basically a massive variety of brands, and also lets us try different approaches to providing value to the brands.
And we've been going on for quite a minute here. I'll wrap it up with this last question for you guys. What advice do you have for content creators when trying to make content that is bringing value to the world instead of just engagement farming?
This is the beauty of Bittensor, isn't it? So all subnets are basically all the value in subnets is from the miners, right? So it's not really down to us to give the advice to the content creators, because you guys know way better than we do. And you're going to learn whilst you're on the journey on Bitcast what works and what works best for you and how to maximize your impact. And it's just the whole competition layer of Bittensor. So my advice would be to content creators of what not to do is, like, don't try and game the system. Don't try and engagement farm, and don't be buying likes and buying subscribers, because we have all the data to shut that down, and you're going to be wasting your time. But if you're a genuine creator who's making brilliant content, that's your game, and yeah, do it as best as you can and do it in your own way, and you'll do really, really well.
And then, Will, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of skills that go into being a successful miner on Bitcast. From more creative skills like video editing, writing a script, animations, everything that goes into a video. But I think possibly the key skill to be a very successful miner long term, and this is the direction we're probably going to try and push it in, is building an audience, growing that audience, keeping that audience with you as a creator on a journey. So I think what I'm looking for is long-term growth and sustainable channel building. Those are probably the creators that I'm going to be most in favor of, over sort of more short-term impact, flash in the pan sort of creations. But we'll just have to see what we get, and we'll try and guide it in the direction that brings the most value.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you guys on, and you're less than a week old, so excited to see what you guys can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant.
Thanks for having us.
See ya.